Today, I'm super excited that we have you, Steve. We've got Steve Losefsky. Did I get it right?
You got it right. Losefsky.
Losefsky. Steve Losefsky from Medicus. And we know Medicus because Medicus is actually our IT company and has been for 10 years. And I feel very strongly about you guys. You've done a great job for us. And so I'm really happy to have you today. What our goal right now with this interview, Steve, is we've been doing a big campaign on future of work. And the future of work, everybody hears that it's kind of a thing out there in the world right now. But COVID-19 made a lot of companies change the way they're doing business, especially with employees being more remote in some cases. We've got companies that are 100% remote now, companies that are hybrid, but we still have a lot of companies that are in office, a lot of medical practices, they can't really do a lot of the work remote. Restaurants can't do work remote. So it's a combination though. And what we're trying to get out is, what can we do to help our clients and contacts and people in our circle to be prepared for what COVID has done from an IT security perspective. So that's where you come in and your expertise. So as you know, a lot of companies have gone more remote. We have, as an organization, we're about 95% remote working right now. And that has produced a lot of challenges. So, cybersecurity is always a big challenge for companies, but right now it is bigger than ever. I think it's a huge risk to companies, especially as you've got employees out working from home, where before, if they were in an office, they were protected, with physical and electronic layers of security. But now you've got a lot of people working remote. I want to kind of just pick your brain a little bit about what you think, what should we be doing to mitigate risk of having employees, working remote? And, you guys handle a lot of medical practices, so do we. I know they may have more people in the office, but there's a lot of companies that still have people remote. What are some things that we should be doing as organizations to mitigate the risk of having people working remote?
Yeah, Laura, it's a great question, and I think it forced us. COVID-19 forced us to react. Most companies to react very quickly. As you said, there's been a trend over the years of people working remotely, working from home. But COVID-19, it was all of a sudden one day, poof, everybody's got to work from home, right?
Right.
Scatter. And a lot of companies just were not prepared for that, right? It was like, what do we do? Because we've never really given that much thought or consideration. And you summarized pretty good the risks associated with that, right? We focused on building our networks internally and having our employees in house, and all of a sudden they scatter like ants. And as soon as you connect to the internet, you're exposed to bad actors and outside threats. And now these people are working from home and connecting to our resources. So it's a big risk. And I think once COVID-19 hit, it was very reactionary for a lot of companies. And we, as a IT company and as a business, a lot of people just did what they had to do to get people access to be able to work, to try to be efficient, to try to be effective. But now I appreciate what you're doing because, we need to be more strategic about it, right? Now that we've done that and they've scattered, the dust has settled a little bit. Let's start to be a bit more proactive, as a business, and think about, okay, what does this really mean? Is this something that we're going to embrace as an organization, and we're going to start having a much larger percentage of our organization work from home, or is our goal to really bring everybody back into the office for whatever reason, and they need to work from home, and we just need that emergency response, right? Somebody tested positive, okay, fine, we have a go kit, let's get that person working from home securely. So I think it's important for businesses now to kind of take a half a step back and re-look at, okay, where is this going? How are we going to leverage it? Is this an opportunity for us? What should we be looking at? And from my perspective, it's always business strategy first, right? What does the business need? I think a lot of business owners tend to get intimidated by the technology and not want to engage in conversations with technical people because they don't understand all the acronyms. And we're really good at acronyms and confusing people and making things seem really complicated. But I think it's important to at first sit down and say, okay, in this new world, if we're going to embrace remote workers, how does that affect our business? Right? I mean, from the most important thing in your business is your employees. What is that impact on them from working from home? Can they still be productive? Can we still have the culture that we've worked so hard to achieve in our businesses? What are the business requirements, right? So what are our goals? What kind of applications do our end users need access to? What are we hoping to achieve with these remote workers? What type of positions can work from home, right? Not all positions can work from home. But I think it's having that business conversation first of, okay, what are our business objectives? Where are we going? What technology do we have to leverage? What workers have the ability to work from home? And then how do we, from there, it's okay. Then if we're going to have a person work from home, or they need to work from home, right? Do they just need a simple Chrome device where they're just opening up a web browser and accessing a simple application? Are they somebody that needs to have a telephone? Are there somebody that needs to have a printer and a scanner, right? Like then we start talking about what are the requirements that we have to meet in order for somebody to, go home and be productive as remote employee. And then we start to talk about the security aspects, right? So what does that actually mean? So, for me, it's always about finding this balance between, the business needs, the employee, the security, and then our budget, right?
Yeah,
Because
budget always kind of comes into play, doesn't it?
it sure does. And, from a technology perspective, we can solve and I say this tongue in cheek, we can solve the security issue, right? There's a tool out there for everything, right? We can lock those networks down. We can protect those remote users. There are plenty of technology tools and capabilities out there that we can do this securely. The problem is we're balancing these business requirements, employee efficiency, right? Security and budget, right? So how do we find that happy balance, right? And so it takes conversations, right? It takes the business owners, the CEOs, the CFOs, the managers understanding what the requirements are, engaging with the technology team to say, okay, how do we find this balance between supporting our remote users, the security requirements, and our budget? Because at the end of the day, people say, budget's not first, but we run a business, right? We don't have unlimited resources. Budget is always a factor. So I know I threw a lot out there.
No, I definitely, budget has to be a part of it because you could put so much in place to prevent any type of potential issue that can happen. But then you have no money to hire people or,
Yes.
have the software that you need. Yeah, I totally get that. So Steve, before I go to the next question, I just want you to give a little bit of a background of Medicus, what Medicus does, and your position within the company, if you don't mind.
Sure. So as you said earlier, my name is Steve Losefsky, and it's a great last name because I always know when somebody's calling me to try to sell me something because they totally mess up my last name. So it's perfect. I'm president of Medicus IT, and Medicus IT is a national MSP, managed service provider. We act as basically outsourced IT resources for small, medium-sized businesses. We focus primarily in healthcare. It's kind of our niche. We currently have 5 locations. We're in Atlanta, Orlando, Newark, Ohio, and lovely Phoenix, which is where I'm coming from today.
115 degrees.
150, 116 today,
116.
but it's a dry heat. Yes.
Awesome. Well, and what I always love, the reason that we like to work with Medicus is because your the relationships that you have with the healthcare world and the fact that you do so many healthcare companies, understanding how important for HIPAA and all these other SOC audits and things like that. We do a SOC audit, and there's a lot of IT companies that really didn't understand what that meant. And so
Right.
being able to do an audit on our controls and having an IT company that really understood that. And this was 10 years ago when we started working with you guys. So a company that understood that was very meaningful to me. And so I think that is why we have aligned so well.
Yeah, yeah, and well, thanks for being a customer for that long. We appreciate that. That's 10 years is awesome, and we hope it's another 10 years. And yeah, I mean, having a deeper understanding of a vertical, for us is really important, right? So healthcare, there's a lot of risk in healthcare. There's a lot of challenges
Mhm.
in healthcare, right? We try to take care of the IT portion of it so that our clients can focus on delivering good medicine, right? We need
They
to
do.
make sure that, especially these days, right? I mean, they're under so much pressure. There's so many issues going on. The last thing they need to worry about is their IT infrastructure and can I access my EMR or scanning or faxing, right?
Yeah.
They need to focus on delivering good healthcare.
Exactly. So back on what we were talking about, one thing that that I've thought about, and I know a lot of companies are dealing with this, is having more remote employees again, having these remote employees having laptops, whatever they have. Sometimes they could go connect to a public Wi-Fi network, or they're not their in-house office isn't the same as being in an office. So
Yep.
I worry about things like, what are important assets that individual could have for a company that has now taken it outside the office and has it wherever. Company list, your client list, that's a big asset. Um, any type of customer data, anything like that. What are some actionable things that clients or companies could do to try to prevent problems from happening around those type of assets?
Yeah. So um, we're talking about managing risk, basically, right?
Right.
And so the first thing I want to say there is, from a business perspective, um, as a business owner or C-level person, the first thing you want to do is make sure you have cyber liability insurance, right? The reality is, these days, it's not if you're going to have a breach, it's when, right? And how
Yeah.
bad is it going to be, and what's that impact going to be? And I can tell you, it's an expensive proposition, right? When it hits. It's usually not a great day, and there's negative impacts. And so, make sure that you have cyber policies in place and you're covered in the likely event that something's going to happen to you, right? And then, so for me, it's the risk first. Let's make sure we can mitigate those risks that you're talking about by having insurance in place. And then the next step is, the most important thing we have as a company next to our employees, is our data, right? I tell people all the time, I can buy you a new laptop, I can buy you a new server, I can buy you a new router, buy you anything. I can't buy you data, right? I can't buy all of that intellectual property that you've worked for so hard, to build and grow your business on, right? So focus on making sure your backups are there, right? Making sure we know where our data is, how it's being stored, how it's being replicated offsite, so that in the event, again, if something happens, we know that at least our data is secure, right? We got hit with ransomware, one of our remote employees did something they shouldn't have. Our systems are down, but at least we know that, hey, we know where our data is, it's safe, we know how to recover it. So it may be a couple day interruption, but it's not gonna take us out.
Right. Right.
Right. So focus on those things first. And then, like you said earlier, we've spent a lot of time working on our internal infrastructures, right? Our business. And I don't want to get too technical, so I try to use
Mhm.
different ways of getting people to visualize technology, right? But if we think of our business as kind of like the castle, right? We've built this infrastructure within the castle to keep our data and our people and our applications protected within the castle, right?
Right.
So now, if we say, hey, I'm gonna go send these people home, or I'm gonna send them outside the castle, the easiest way to protect all that stuff is just to have them access the data that's in the castle. The data never leaves the castle,
Right.
right? So I send them home with a Chromebook or a laptop, and all they're able to do is come in and leverage resources inside the castle. And I'm never moving data outside of the castle to the end user, right? The end user is just seeing video and keystrokes, but we're not allowing any of that stuff to get outside our world.
Right.
So from an ideal perspective, that's ideal. So we have some clients who have built an infrastructure either in-house or in the cloud where we leverage technologies like remote desktop, RDS, Citrix environments, VDI environments, where basically your desktop resides inside the castle. And when you leave the castle, you're just connecting back and you're leveraging the resource that's inside the castle. And all you're seeing again are just screenshots. So now you still benefit from all of that security that you built within that castle. You're extending it to that remote employee.
Yeah, so
So
that's great. So that's great advice, especially if it's a company that right now they weren't set up to even send people remote. It's a pretty cost effective. I know we did that a while back. We had instead of having everybody have laptops, we had some of those devices that you're talking about, and they could even
Chromebook.
work. So it could even be, when you talk about the castle, that could be in office servers, or it could be in the cloud, right? It could be
Correct.
either.
Absolutely. Yep. It's that infrastructure. So we actually did that for a few clients, healthcare clients that weren't ready, right, for that COVID-19. And over the weekend, we had to deploy 200 Chromebooks, right? They had an infrastructure where they had virtual desktops available to them inside the castle. They just didn't have it outside. So we went out and purchased 200 Chromebooks and got them configured in basically a kiosk mode where the user would turn it on, and the only option they had was to join a wireless network and then securely open up the app to present them with their desktop, and away they went, right? So in a pinch, right, that works great for a majority of the users, right? That still doesn't solve for the person who may need a printer or a phone or some of those other peripherals, but it was a quick way to get them access to key applications and continue business.
That's awesome. What about for companies who do have employees that have their own or have laptops through the business, and they had to be sent, home to work remote? Is there something that you would recommend they have on those laptops? So some type of way to shut it down from, remotely, or
Yeah.
what do
Yep.
you recommend on that?
Sure. So ideally, we in an ideal world, we don't want employees working on personal devices, right? We know the reality of that, right? The world is moving to a BYOD, um, world, and we have ways, technology to deal with that. So we know that it's going that way, and we support that. But you have to have the infrastructure on the other side to try to manage that. There's plenty of tools to do that, and we can do that. So in your example, if I have an employee who's got a company-owned laptop and it's already been joined to the domain, and I've been able to apply security policies, a couple things I want to do before they leave the office is, one, make sure the device is encrypted, right? That's probably the most important thing. If it gets stolen, nobody can access any data on that, right? So it's been inside the network. We may not know what files they copied over or what they're working on it. So make sure it's encrypted, and make sure you have the ability to manage that encryption remotely. And at minimum, make sure there's an agent on it, which most, as a managed service provider, as any network device, we have our agent on it so that we can help support the user remotely, that we can push, ensure that they're getting the Windows updates, things like that. But you want to be able to still control that device, even though it's outside of your castle. So if we make sure it's secure, that it's encrypted, make sure that we have a way to access it to support the user, right? So if the user's having an issue, can I log on to their desktop and help them through that issue or configure something? And then make sure I have the ability to, through the encryption per se, can I automatically just shut that laptop down and brick it, right? It got stolen. The next time it connects to the internet, I want to make sure it gets bricked and nobody can use it.
Mm. That's great. That's great. I bet there's a lot of companies out there that are not doing that.
For sure, right?
And I've seen that
And
happen. We've
Yep.
seen that happen where, I had an employee who had a laptop. He got into a taxi one time. I don't even remember, might have been in California, and left the laptop, and if we didn't
Yep.
have that ability at the time, that would have been really concerning, right? But
Yep.
we had the
For sure.
encryption on it, and we were also able to shut it down. So that was important. But I bet a lot of companies are not thinking about that.
No, and the other thing they're not thinking about is the two-factor or multi-factor authentication, right? Where a lot of companies are still not enforcing that even within their own castle, which they should be. Um,
Tell
you
us
know,
what that
because
means.
so
Those of
two-factor
us who don't know.
authentication, if you don't know, is we're all used to passwords, right? When we log onto our PC, we enter a username, we have a password. Two-factor authentication is an additional challenge, right? So it's people would, if you do banking, you see it, right? When you try to log into your bank account, you'll get a text message and you have to enter a secondary PIN, right? So that really protects us in the event that if our identity gets stolen or somebody gets our username and password, because we're also good at using password manager tools and having different passwords for every website that we log into.
Yeah.
Not, right?
Yeah,
Nobody does that.
exactly. Use
Everybody
the same
uses the
one.
same email address, same password, right? That website gets breached. Now your password is out on the dark web and everybody's just hacking away at different sites trying to get in, right? So when you have two-factor authentication, even if somebody gets your password, that secondary challenge will prevent them from being able to access their resources, right? So like in our environment, for example, when I'm inside my office, when I open up my laptop and try to log in, I'm challenged with a two-factor authentication just to log into my desktop.
Mm-hmm.
Once I'm in and I'm in my office, I have single sign-on to all of our key applications. The second I leave our office and I'm out on a public internet or I'm home, still have to two-factor authenticate to get my laptop, but then I get challenged for each application that I have to log into, two-factor challenge, right? Because it knows I'm not in the office and it says, hey, you're trying to access this really important resource. You're not in the castle today. So I'm going to force you, um, to do that two-factor authentication, right? And that's that balance between,
Right.
if it was left up to the IT guys, everybody with two-factor authentication to every application, every time within the office, out of the office,
Right.
right? Doctors are not going to do that, right? If we're in a healthcare environment, every time they walk into a patient room, they're not going to want to go through
I
that
have to.
process. It just slows it
Right.
down. But if they're outside the office, it's reasonable to challenge that person to make sure that they are who they say they are.
That makes sense. So, all that we're talking about also, well, some of this we can manage and make happen. Other things I feel it's real important that your employees, whether they're remote, hybrid, in office, whatever, that they understand that data security is real important. Making sure that we sensitize them to doing the right things. Do you
Yep.
guys do you have any best practices or ways that you recommend companies train their people to
Yeah.
understand how important this stuff is? Because sometimes you're an employee and you're just trying to get a job done and you're going to try to do it as quickly as you can. And then any of these things that you're talking about sometimes can cause people to, it could be a little bit more difficult to get their job done, right?
Yep.
You guys have best practices that you recommend on helping sensitize or train their employees around this?
Yeah, so there's a couple aspects of that, and one I think is from a corporate perspective, having a policy of least privilege, right? Meaning, just because I'm an employee doesn't mean I should have access to all the company resources,
Right.
right? So we protect ourselves by saying, hey, this is your job role. This is the data you need access to, right? So from a network perspective, we're making sure that they can't accidentally leak data because of least privilege, right? So that's kind of where we start at the on the corporate side. But the end user side, most breaches are coming through end users, right? Phishing, social engineering, right? It's the end user who's causing that. So training is the biggest issue, right? Making this top of mind for somebody. So, for example, we use a product called Know Before, and it basically allows us to have cyber training for companies, right? So every month They have a whole library of cyber training materials, and we assign employees the training. And they're usually pretty short, 10, 15-minute, really educational training snippets that each team member has to go through, each month, right? Because we want to keep this top of mind. So they get little nuggets of information along the way. And then also on a monthly basis, we're doing our own phishing against our own employees, right? So we send out emails to try to bait employees into clicking or doing something or making a phone call or giving up something that they shouldn't, right? And as soon as they do that, boom, right? They know it right away. The email gets generated to the compliance officer. And so the next month, their training is not the 5-minute, it's the 30-minute session, right? Because clearly you're not paying attention.
I love
Um,
that.
yeah, so from it's really just making it top of mind, right? You can have all the policies you want, right? You can have great policies in the employee handbook, but you have to be intentional, right? And it has to be ongoing, and it has to be constant, so that people are thinking, right? We have people all the time that will stand up in the middle of the cubes and go, "Are you guys fishing us again?" Right? Because we can get pretty creative, as techs. I think the best one that we did is when the new Star Wars was coming out, we sent out a phishing email that made it look like it was coming from a vendor, inviting the team to a pre viewing of the new Star Wars movie, and just click on this link to get your ticket to the new Star Wars movie. Right?
That's cruel.
Yeah, and so you can imagine the number of clicks we got on that one. But it's an ongoing, right? You are correct that the employee is our weakest link,
Mhm.
especially ones that have a lot of access, right?
Right.
C level employees.
Mhm.
So put those training pieces in place. Do it consistently. Do it over and over. So it's always top of mind, that people aren't just so caught up in the day to day of, I got to get my work done, right? Let there be consequences for them not stopping
I
it.
love the idea. I mean, you're absolutely right that training can't be a one-time thing, especially around something this important. Whatever, there was something I read, it takes 8 times before somebody understands something that you're trying to tell them. And
Yep.
so I think it has to be ongoing. You know,
Yep.
we one a product that we sell is a learning management system that you can schedule things for for people to get training. And I think what you're talking about aligns with that, in that it needs to be something that's little snippets. It's got to be small amounts at a time, but it's got to be over and over and over. And
Yep.
what I wanted to know though is these phishing emails that you send out as a test, do you do that for clients as well, or do you do it just
No, no,
internally?
no. Yeah, no, we do it for clients as well. So it's a add-on product that we can do that for clients as well.
That's a great idea, because even if the employees knew that it was being done as the IT company, just because they don't know whether it's real or from you guys, they're going to be extra careful, you
Yep.
know. And
Yep.
I think that's great. That's a great
Yeah.
idea.
And it really needs buy-in. Like anything else, it's buy-in from top down, right? We've actually had some clients turn it off because we were too good at the phishing emails, and
Right.
we made one, sent it out as the CEO, and asked people, to do certain things, and the people did it, and the CEO got upset because they were bombarded with noise, which we thought was great because it made the point, but they shut it down because they saw it as noise.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If they do get hit with a real phishing scam at some point, they will
Yep.
have appreciated that you did that.
Yeah, and they'll be sorry that they didn't. It's a very inexpensive tool to deploy and use and manage. It doesn't take a lot of time, a lot of resources, but
Right.
has huge paybacks, right? I mean, just imagine the cost of your business being down for 2 days, not only from a pure cost standpoint, but what's the impression that your customers get, right?
Yeah.
There's
Well,
there's big
there's a company in my industry, in the payroll industry, that was a victim of ransomware, and that it was another payroll provider. They were down for about a week,
yeah.
and it was a victim of ransomware, and that's been a very challenging little scam that's going on out there as ransomware.
Yep.
Speaking of the phishing scams and attacks, do you see that with this COVID environment, has the volume gone up with that?
I think it stayed about the same. It just gave a different target, right? It's what's got people's attention today,
Mhm.
right? Like, ooh, new COVID vaccine just released, right? It
Right.
was so hard to get COVID testing, right? People that wanted to be tested couldn't, right? So you get this email and said, hey, we have appointments available today for rapid testing, right? It just gives it's great opportunity, right, for those who want to take advantage
Yeah.
of that.
The other
Yep.
thing that I read, I was reading before interviewing you, I was reading some research on what are big IT security topics right now in a COVID world, so to speak. And one of the things was that with employees who are remote, now they're having, in a lot of cases, they're having to homeschool children,
Yeah.
work. They've got their spouse, which I do. I work at home. Our company, like I said, is about 95% remote right now. We were able to transition fairly quickly because we had already done this in the past, and you guys helped with a lot of things that we had put in
Yep.
place. But having spouses working and college age kids working and homeschooling, that something I had read, and I don't know if you've seen any of this, is that people are more, they're not as focused on those.
Sure.
They're,
Yeah. It's a
disoriented.
huge distraction, right? So, going back to, what are those key things we need to look for if we're going to have a remote team? One of the big ones is a spot to work, right?
Right,
A kitchen table is not a spot to work, right?
right,
Because of those distractions, right? The kids
right,
running through, the dogs barking, somebody coming to get something to eat, right?
right.
There's things. So really, you want to make sure you have a dedicated spot to work. But then that also, with everybody being home, how good is your internet connection, right? So you're trying to work, your spouse is trying to work, your kids are taking online Zoom meetings, right? The other kids are watching Netflix,
Right,
and you're trying to have a video conference, right?
right,
There's a lot of things to consider in pulling that off successfully.
right. Well, one thing that we did here, because I'm doing videos like this, and we're doing town hall meetings and a lot of Zoom, is we got a second internet
Yeah.
service. So we have, the regular, we have Xfinity cable internet, and
Yep.
we also have an AT&T Uverse internet connection. So
Yeah, correct. So, yep. And we typically see that in offices, right? Where we want to have redundant internet connections that are active and can fail over. But we're seeing more and more of that for home users as well, especially if they're dedicated for that exact reason, right? The family stays on one internet connection. You, as a remote worker, you have your own dedicated connection. So we don't have those types of issues. And I've seen companies pay for that, right? That's part of the, having either a laptop. We'll pay for your remote connection. We'll get that set up for you, which is a great idea. The other thing that people do is, we talked about even being at home or somewhere else is, leveraging hotspots, right? So um, I've been at home myself where I'm in that situation where I have three teenagers as well, and two of them are watching YouTube and one's playing video games, and I'm trying to make a conference call and I can't. There's just no bandwidth left. It's done. So I use my hotspot, my mobile hotspot, right? So I turn my phone on. I have a hotspot, which is great because it gives me 4G, and now we have 5G. It's a secure connection, right? I'm not on the same network as the video games and things like that. So it's another important consideration is if I have a mobile workforce and they're truly mobile, does it make sense to have those kind of data plans that allow them to leverage hotspots versus getting on public Wi-Fi.
Right. Oh, that's a really good idea. I mean, I can do that too, but I never thought about that for employees to be able to do that. And that's what I was going to ask you. Are they secure? Is that a secure connection in your mind?
Well, so it's more secure than connecting to your home
Hmm.
wireless, right? Because you have other devices on, you have TVs, you have refrigerators, you've got washers and dryers, right? Think of all these devices that malicious actors have the opportunity to connect to now. and try to access your device. So sure, if you are, anytime you can isolate yourself and be on your own and not part of a network with other public facing devices, you're much better off.
Yeah, awesome. So I just wanted to ask, this is a little more of a broad question. Um, you guys do have a very a big focus on healthcare. We do as well, and I think anything that pertains to the healthcare world will really, for the most part, help other companies too.
Sure.
What are you during this time? And it could be just general, even outside of the COVID world, but what did you guys decide to do? What are some best practices that you would like to add? Like things that you guys have gone out to your clients proactively recently and said, hey, with the change of the environment, everything that's going on, here's what we recommend you put in place now.
Yeah, the list is long and distinguished, right?
Right.
Because each of our clients are in a different position, a different security posture, right? So we have some healthcare clients that are actually, uh, payers, right? So they do insurance claims processing and things like that, and they have a big remote workforce. And they go to and I'm not going to say the extreme, but they actually deploy physical firewalls, laptop devices, to their home users, right? So when they go home, they're plugging in a firewall, they plug in their laptop. If they have a printer, they plug the printer in, right? So their security posture is pretty significant.
Right.
For those clients that are at the other end of the spectrum, right? If we can just get them to deploy two-factor authentication, that's great. Or if we can just get them to encrypt their devices, that's great, right? Because we have to incrementally get them there, right?
Right.
So our goal with our clients is like I said before, understand where they are from a business perspective. It's been hard to implement significant security changes in the short run because of all, as business owners, our cash flow has been impacted significantly,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Healthcare as well, right? I mean, they have not seen the patient volumes, right? It got knocked down, so their cash flow has been hurt significantly, and everybody's hesitant to make the investments in some of these technologies. So it's been really hard, right? It's what can we do? What things can we do to shore up security without spending a ton of money, right? So least privileged access, right? Two-factor authentication, the training, right? Those things that don't necessarily cost a lot of money, but can have a significant impact. But there's things that we talk, like if you're going, there's, a basic checklist, right? Of things that you can do, coach your employees to do, whether it's a BYOD device, or something you're taking home from the office. But, we said earlier, encrypt the device, right? We always want to make sure our devices are encrypted.
Right.
Always make sure you're using a supported operating system, right? You don't want people out there using Windows 7 that can't get security updates anymore, right? Be on a Windows 10 device that has the latest Windows security patches applied. If you
Right.
have applications on your devices, make sure they're up to date, right? Don't be 2 versions behind. If there's a release, a lot of times it's a security related release to the application. So make sure your applications are up to date. Disable auto logins, right? Don't have any device that you can just pick up and have access to, right? Get a pin on it, get some kind of security on there. So, make sure that's disabled. Use good password policy, right? Don't use the same password at work and then on your Amazon account and everywhere else, right? There's plenty of password free or just a few buck a month password managers out there, right? Leverage those tools so that you have different passwords for each application that you access. Enable two-factor authentication whenever you can, right? For Amazon has it, for your email, for
Right.
anything, enable two-factor authentication. Enable the Find My Device, right? Like you said, for that laptop that got left in a vehicle or a
Right.
device that got left, a lot of times you can find it. And if you have the right agent on there, you can remote wipe or encrypt, or shut that device down if it is ultimately stolen. And then install a VPN client on the device, right? There's, again, if you have a tablet or your own personal PC or a iPhone, right? There's plenty of cheap VPN products like NordVPN or ExpressVPN, right? Which basically creates a tunnel between your device and where you're going, so that you can't have any bad actors in the middle. If you're sitting in a Starbucks or something and somebody's sniffing the network and trying to access your device, if you have the VPN turned on, they're not going to be able to see what. So that's a couple of, I know I rambled a
That's a
lot
lot.
there.
No, that's good. Those are, well, what I like to do with these is get actionable, advice to give people. And I think all of those are not complicated things that they
They're
can,
not, and they're almost all free,
and they're almost all
right? Right. I mean, it's not. We're not talking about spending a lot of money to really increase your security posture, right? So it's no different than home security, right? When we for our houses, we just want to be secure enough that somebody looks at our house and then just moves on to an easier target, right? As an end user, you want to do the same thing, right? I want to be reasonable so that I can access my devices and be productive and efficient, but I need to have a level of security that I'm just not the easy target.
Exactly. Well, Steve, this has been so helpful. I really appreciate your time. And I would like for you to just, give a real quick, if somebody sees this and is interested in talking to you guys about
Sure.
what you offer, how could they get in
Yep.
touch?
Yeah, the easiest way is to email sales@medicusit.com.
Okay.
That'll start the ball rolling, and at least we can reach out to somebody and have a conversation. My email address is easy. It's slosefsky@medicusit.com. Feel free to email me directly. I love to have conversations like this and try to help people, even if, ultimately, not a customer. We share kind of the same go-giver philosophy as you guys do, that, we're a community. We're here to help each other. And when you do good things for others, then good things happen to you. So happy to help answer any questions or
That's
engage however
awesome.
possible.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think this is so timely and important to everybody, that's out there right now. We're all dealing with an unprecedented amount of weirdness going on right now. So
Yes, for
I
sure.
think this is a real important piece that we're all dealing with right now. So
Yep.
I really
And
appreciate your time, Steve, and take care. Have a great weekend. And
yes, I will.
we will be in contact soon.
Sounds good. Thank
All
you, Lori.
right. Thank you, Steve.